I'm Bruce O'Donnell. Welcome to another episode of Seeing the Light. Today we're at beautiful Wormslow State Park in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm here at the Tabby Ruins. It's a wonderful historic place, but today we're going to be talking about keeping a level head when photographing. Specifically, we're going to be talking about all things panoramic. One of the things that I hear a lot when I watch videos is photographers telling us to take the extra time to make sure our tripods are level before we do the panoramic shot. Well, what do they mean, the tripod being level? Is that my camera being level? So those are the things we're going to talk about. So we're going to be talking about three things. What needs to get leveled and why? What do I use to measure it? And then what are the strategies for actually getting it level? So while most of you might have that figured out, we're going to be going over some fundamentals of that, and plus I'm going to be showing you probably a technique that you have never seen before. I don't think anybody else is doing it. I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying nobody else is doing it. But I like it, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Plus I'm going to give you my cheat sheet for lens focal length angle swings. I'll tell you about that more later. Plus, if that weren't enough, I'm going to give you my 8 points for making sure your panoramic is successful. So let's head over to the tripod. Let's get that all dialed in. We'll get started, and hopefully I'll learn a thing or two, and I hope you do too. All right, let's go. Okay, let's assume we found a subject that we want to take a panoramic photograph of. Now we need to get our tripod level in preparation for that. And again, by being level, what I'm talking about is the base that you're going to swing your camera on, that needs to be on a perfectly level plane. Otherwise, you're going to be panning uphill or downhill, and your image, when you stitch it together, is going to go uphill and downhill, and you're going to have to crop top and bottom to straighten that out. And you may lose some of the parts of your image that you thought were critical to the composition. So in order to avoid that, we're going to make sure you get it straight. How do we know when it's level? Well, most tripods heads today have a built-in bubble level somewhere in the base. And that's probably the most common way to level your tripod head, is to use that built-in bubble level. All right, so if you don't have that, you have a tripod head and it doesn't have the right kind of level built into it, here's an easy technique that's very inexpensive to accomplish the same thing. Let's take a look at this other tripod I've got over here. Okay. On this old Gitzo tripod, I have put a post level that I got from Home Depot on here. So, you know, this is 12, 15 bucks. I don't think this is a thing of precision, but it'll get you close enough without spending a lot of money on a brand new tripod. So, again, if like this head has no level built into it, have no way of knowing. But if I get this column level on the X and Y axes, I know that the top here will be level and it'll be perfect. So that's one way to do it. Again, pretty inexpensive, probably not a thing of precision, but it'll get you close enough to do well. All right, let's go back to my other tripod, and I'm going to show you some other ways of getting it level other than adjusting legs. Let's look at that. I'm using the Acrotech panoramic head, and that it'll pivot. It's really more almost like a video head. It'll pivot and I can go up and down, but I can't change it this way. But what I can do on my tripod is I can loosen this lever and I can pivot my whole column. So this is the Gitzo GT 2540 LVLL. The LVLL means it has a leveling column in it, and that's basically you have a half ball and a cup, and the column goes down in there, and it's able to rotate back and forth, you know, in infinite directions, and I'm good. I don't have to adjust legs and go around. I can look at my bubble level. If I were really going to do that, I would want to look straight down on it. If you don't want to go buy a new tripod, and I understand that, there are some other ways to do that. Let me show you. This is the Easy Leveler 2. It's about 75 bucks. If I take off my tripod head, I put this on the top of my tripod, put my tripod head on here. Now I've got a device that allows me to make little micro adjustments. If you get your tripod fairly level, then you can use your micro adjustments. And this really works pretty good. It's very precise. So that's about 75 to 100 bucks. The other way to go, each tripod manufacturer probably has their own design on a leveling base. And most of them are very similar to what's built in here. It's a half ball and a cup design. And it comes in a format about like this size. The ones I've looked at that look kind of promising to me are the Acrotech and the Really Right Stuff. Gitzo makes one. They all make one. The Acrotech's about 150 bucks. I think the Really Right Stuff is about $300. So there's some budgetary considerations to be made too. So that is something I would seriously consider for speed, and so you're not so aggravated. Before I start leveling my tripod, one thing I want to do is I want to weigh my tripod down. I want to make it a little more secure. Take my backpack and I attach it to these strings to add a little weight to get some stability, so that I cut down on all possible vibration. So let me show you how I do that. So once I've found my position for my tripod, I have another paracord set up with little hooks, and these have cam locks on it. You can buy these in the camping section at Walmart. They're dirt cheap. So hook that on that side. I hook the other side on the little strap on my tripod, and then I just pull it a little bit tight, just like that. So now that isn't going anywhere. I've probably increased the stability of my tripod 10 times just by doing that. With the weight I've already got out in the field with me, I don't have to bring anything additional with me. But one thing is, I always like to have my backpack attached to the ground. I don't want it suspended where it can swing and introduce some more camera shakes, to make sure that it's resting on the ground, but putting a fair amount of tension on that. So that's step one. Before I level, I want this tripod settled and weighed down. All right, let's talk about the leveling process. Okay, so we have our tripod weighed down. Now, once we do our leveling, nothing will move because it's fairly secure. Now, the way I do my leveling is I put a 1/8 inch aluminum plate between my top of my tripod head and my tripod. And on that plate goes my digital level. This is a post level, but it's more of a precision post level for engineers. It's digital. This is the DigiPass DWL 1000. You can get it on Amazon. It's not cheap. It's a couple $100. But if I'm going to make a trip out to the middle of nowhere, some exotic location that I may never visit again, I'm going to take the extra steps to make sure the images I capture have all the opportunity for success they can have. So here's how I do this. I put it on here, I turn it on, I loosen my lever, and I rotate my column till I get it dead center, lock it down, and I'm good to go. Now, if you don't have a leveling column built into your tripod, if you used one of those leveling bases, you'd be doing the same thing. If you use that leveler 2, easy leveler, you just adjust those little knobs until it's dead center and you're good to go. Now that I've gone through that level of precision, I can put my 300mm lens on here and do a 10 image panoramic and know that it's going to be dead on. I'm not going to have to worry about cropping. If I frame it up the way I like it, I'm going to be able to edit and print it that way. It's going to be dead accurate. So that's my method. I'm sure nobody else is doing that, but I thought I would show you. Since I do a lot of panoramics, I take it kind of seriously, and that works the best. That's the fastest, most accurate way I know of doing it. Let's talk about that cheat sheet I talked about earlier, and that's that focal length angle swing cheat sheet. Let me find that. Okay, so I have put together a little sheet that has all the common focal lengths that I use. On that, I have a vertical and horizontal degree increments. And what is that all about? Okay, this is assuming a full frame camera. If I have my 200mm lens, I'm shooting at 200mm. This says in the vertical position that's set up at, each exposure I make, I need to swing the camera 4 degrees for each additional exposure. So what does that give me? Obviously with panoramics, your images have to be overlapped to stitch together. Now the recommendation typically is 25 to 50% overlap to successfully stitch those together in Photoshop. I have figured at 33%. If I use those measurements, that will give me the 1/3 overlap that I'm looking for, and I'm not going to have any problem stitching that together in Photoshop. And so I'm going to include this information in the show notes below. Where that comes in really handy is in my last video, I was shooting on my car top, and where I had my camera was out to look in it. It was beyond where I could step. I would have to, if I got over there, I would be falling off the top of my car. So it's not unusual to be in a place where you can't really look in there. Maybe I'm backed up against a tree to get this composition I want, and I would have to be able to look through that tree to see in my camera. Well, if I have these measurements, I'm looking down at the etched degree marks in the base of my tripod head, and I take my exposure, I rotate it 4 degrees, I take my next exposure, I rotate it 4 degrees, so I'm not picking out points in my composition to try and line up. And I'm not forgetting, okay, now, was it that branch or that branch that I picked? I don't have to worry about that. This really speeds up my workflow, and in changing light conditions, that could be critical. Lastly, I have my 8 points for successful exposures. And what that is with a long lens, a lens collar at slow shutter speeds, a second or more, there is all sorts of room for vibration and for something to cause blur. So here are my steps for when I'm doing a panoramic. I have this cheat sheet list. Number 1 is I want my tripod level. We talked about that, we covered that. Second, I turn off image stabilization. This lens is not image stabilized, but I do have a 70 to 200 2.8 that is. If I'm using that, I turn that off. Any little vibration causes that optical lens that moves for stabilization to hunt to get everything in alignment. That hunting of that element can cause blur, camera vibration blur in your image. So turn off your image stabilization. I have ruined a lot of shots because I didn't do that. All right, use a cable release. I carry my electronic cable. I don't even know what brand this is. It's $10, $12 on Amazon, but it allows me to release the shutter without actually touching the camera. When I touch the camera, even when I'm being gentle and trying to squeeze it off, that letting go, especially at 300 millimeters, can cause enough vibration to ruin your shot. So next, I'm going to use the 2-second timer for my shutter release. So I'm going to set my timer at 2 seconds so that when I squeeze that off, there's a 2-second delay, then the shutter opens. That 2-second delay allows any other vibration to settle down. And what would cause that vibration? Moving the camera. I take my exposure, I move it 4 degrees, I lock it down, I release it. I'm introducing pressure and vibration to it. Next, make sure all your knobs, your lens collar, all these knobs are tight so that you don't have any mechanical room for vibration. So I kind of double check everything, my column, everything, before I get ready to start. Are those all locked down? Let's not forget, we've got this base level, but we got to get our camera level. So I typically will turn on my built-in level that almost every camera has, and I will use that, and I can loosen my lens collar, get it level, lock it back down. I know that's level. Otherwise, you're going to get jaggies from your camera not being level, and those will have to be cropped off. The 7th thing I do is, if I'm not using Liveview, which I do most of the time, if I'm not, I'm going to use the mirror up feature. You have to go into the menu, set enable mirror up, and what that does is when you trigger the release, the mirror flips up, and then in this case 2 seconds is going to go by because of the timer, and then the shutter is going to open, and then we'll start all over. If you're in Liveview, the mirror is already flipped up. It's flipped up so that the image is hitting the sensor and transmitting it to your display. So I typically will use the Liveview, which drains battery, but I find it to be a little more convenient. And then lastly, make sure the critical area of your composition is in focus. Identify that thing in your composition that makes this image powerful, and make sure that's in focus. So I want to focus on that. I'll either use my autofocus and focus on it, and then set my autofocus to manual so that it's all set, or I'll just set it to manual and use Liveview to zoom in and make sure it's critically sharp before I start. Those are my 8 steps for ensuring that once you've gone through all this work, you're going to get the payoff in having nice, crisp, sharp photographs. So I hope that's helpful. Again, get out, see the light, and photograph something beautiful. Until next time, see ya.
Oh, shoot.